Time now for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both President Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good morning, all. Craig, I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about rhinos, if you all wouldn't mind. And I think we all were probably collectively upset by Eric Greitens' Missouri Senate ad, where he's attacking a rhino with guns and militia. But that has led into, at least from my point of view, some interesting dynamics regarding this rhino thing, but maybe this Kino thing, Trump in name only, as kind of conflating together. And I just would be eager for your observations about some of that.
Well, first of all, this Republicans in name only, this rhino approach is the classic, label some segment of some group with a name and then attack it. And, I know I've been around in Republican politics a long time, but I've never seen the Republican Party succeed when it fractures from within. In other words, what we need is a large tent. What we need to do is be inviting to people with views that generally comport to what used to be some of the tenets of the Republican Party. And what we're getting is, by a minority, in my view, a minority within the party, a very vocal minority, we're getting a huge backlash on a litmus test as to whether you are sufficiently supportive of a one-term former president who frankly has embarrassed himself and the nation, as the hearings have clearly shown. And if you haven't somehow withdrawn your support from him, and you are, or if you have withdrawn your support and you're now opposed or not adequately supportive, you're in this rhino category. Now, that would be bad enough, but the Eric Greitens ad is, an aberration. It is from a man who was embarrassed and forced out of the governor's race. He has a former wife who accuses him of abuse. He issued, just so our listeners know, this is a candidate in Missouri who issued hunting licenses for rhinos for a $10 contribution at a time when the nation is deeply troubled by the use of firearms and the killing of innocent people. And then he goes beyond that and runs an ad in which he says we're going rhino hunting with some kind of a 2-barrel shotgun or something. This is a very dangerous kind of message. Even Twitter, I think, took down his ad, claiming it violated their policies. Now, again, there's thousands of people running for office. This kind of behavior is just beyond the pale, and it's limited to very few people. I actually years ago heard a line by Dr. Phil, who was asked to describe or explain what he thought some well-known person, why some well-known person would have engaged in some highly controversial activity. And what Dr. Phil said was, I don't really have a clinical analysis, but I am forced to ask myself, if this was the individual's best idea, what in the world was his second best idea? If this is the way that Eric Greitens thought he could gain support, and he ruled other options out, I hate to say what the other options are.
Al, following up on Greitens' ad, I mean, you might be willing to agree that those ads do make money. They do appeal to a certain group that in a primary situation may make the difference.
Well, they may make money, but that doesn't mean they're good for the country or good for our political system. Look, I think this rhino attack is disgusting. It's dangerous. We've seen in vivid detail that people can be motivated by their political leaders to violence and to do violent things. It's what the January 6th committee hearings have shown. And so it's a very dangerous thing. And I'd like to think it was receding, but it's not. It's growing. I mean, there's a piece in the Post either yesterday or last night that the security for the members of the January 6th committee has been increased because they, in the last 24 hours before that story was written, they had received so many threats. That goes along at the same time this ad was in. But promoting gun violence, promoting violence in our gun-saturated society is not a good thing. It really reflects some very, I think, negative changes in our politics over the last 3 decades. The parties have become much more ideologically pure. That's one of the, or ideological. It used to be that you had conservative Democrats and moderate liberal Republicans. You don't have those anymore. Now the most conservative Democrat is more liberal than the most liberal Republican. So there's no political overlap between the two parties, which is really important if you want to get things done and you want to have compromise. The polarization is obvious, but when you have polarized and ideological parties, then the next step is to go to ideological purity. And what's on both sides, there are small segments of the party who are trying to enforce the ideological purity. You know, I think if you look at what Pew's analysis of the electorate, actually it's not it's a significant part of the Republican Party because it's called, Pew calls them faith and flag and faith conservatives. They're basically the hardcore Trumpies. And they're about 23% of the GOP, but only 10% of the national electorate. On our side, we have the progressive left, which is 12% of the Democrats and 6% of the electorate. They're both trying to incidentally, I just want, one of the great ironies of this for the Trumpites is Trump's the real Rhino. He spent his whole life for gun control, for abortion, but then he decided he had a political avenue in the Republican Party, so he's changed all his position. But you know, both of these sort of fringe groups are trying to enforce their agenda, enforce the purity of the party. But there's a significant difference. On the left, and nobody who's watched this program has any doubt that I'm not a big fan of what the left's doing to the Democratic Party and making it harder to win in swing districts. But they challenge in primaries, you know, they dominate social media, they take positions that hurt Democrats and other in tough races. But the truth is, that's all within the political system, and that's legitimate politics. I don't like it, I oppose it, but it's legitimate politics. But there's a group in the Republican Party that's now going further. You know, we saw what happened on January 6th, these calls for violence, even mob violence, threats of violence like this ad, in an effort to purify the party. I just think that's incredibly dangerous. And, you know, if it's not stopped, and if saner heads don't gain control of the Republican Party, it's going to really undermine our democracy. I'm reminded of two things. One is Jack Kemp, the late Jack Kemp, my dear friend, told me one time when we were fighting over some issue, he said, you know, we're political adversaries, we're not enemies. The Russians are our enemies. And the other thing is a statement that the late Mark Shields made. He said, politics is about looking for converts, not punishing heretics. You know, Craig and I grew up in an era of politics being addition, not subtraction. And I think it's important for the country to get back to that. I just want to say one other thing, and that is I want to recognize the passing last week of Mark Shields. He is a great friend, a friend of mine for over 50 years. I first met him when he was running Ohio for Senator Ed Muskie in 1972. He is such a delight, and not only that, he and David Brooks are the model that we're following in Fromm and Fuller. So I just wanted to note that America will miss his wisdom.
Yeah, thank you.
Dave, let me also associate myself with that. I knew Mark Shields as well, and I just have nothing but the highest regard for him. And I enjoyed something that David Brooks said, which was, you know, we came on every week and people expected us to debate. We didn't debate as much as we did discuss, that I kind of think it's what Al and I did. One more quick point, though, on these campaign ads that I wanted to make, and that is, you know, it's one thing for organizations to run really tough ads. They do that. They fund them. I think you have to hold candidates completely responsible for what they choose to air in these ads. Campaign ads are one of the principal vehicles for getting a message across to your constituents about who you are, what you believe, you know, kind of judgment you have. And I think that you know, candidates who are running these desperate ads need to be held to account, not only by the voters, but by those who are supporting them, because they are taking us in a dangerous direction.
Well, I really believe that, I mean, I agree with Craig, it taking us in this terrible direction. I mean, I find it very scary when you have people who are supposed to be our leaders, who are vying for the most important offices in our land, and are essentially telling people, if you don't like what your political opponent says, get out of, you know, AR-15 and mow them down. I mean, that ad, I mean, this guy is a particular crackpot, but it doesn't take a genius to see that when you know, somebody like President Trump threatens somebody, you know, they're harassed, they're threatened. We saw Ruby Freeman and her daughter Shay in the hearings, you know, who've had their life ruined because they did their civic duty of being poll watchers, poll workers, and nearly everyone. I mean, young Adam Kinzinger, who's going to be in this afternoon's hearing, will be the questioner. You know, has had his wife and his 5-year-old son threatened. This is a very destructive course, and yeah, I think where is Mitch McConnell? Where is you know, this guy's running for his body? Why isn't he saying, I don't want this guy, and it's, you know, he's got to cease and desist? You know, even where is Mike Pence? He stood up for democracy, but is he willing to tell these crazy nutcakes who think that they can enforce their politics with machine guns that they've got to stand down?
Yeah.
Or is it going to be stand by, as President Trump said? I think that's the question.
Well, we have to leave it there. Al, from Craig Fuller, thanks so much. We will see you next week.